Hello, welcome back to the A2theK Wrestling Show for the Deathmatch Debate. Anthony, what have we got in store for the people as part of this week's unique segment?
Oh.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm just kidding. So obviously, Carl, we had or last week, depending on when you're listening to us, or months ago. You might be listening to it like years later, I don't know. But we had a match, Carl, that really pushed death matches into more of the public eye, let's say. So AEW is getting a bigger platform. It's something WWE don't really go near, especially to this level. But we had Chris Jericho going up against almost the king of the death match at this point, Nick Gage. And this has caused a lot of debates and a lot of controversy almost with people trying to suggest this sort of thing's barbaric and so on like that. So it led to maybe us let's talk about death matches, because there seems to be a large belief that there's no place for this in wrestling. And there's a lot of people who believe that there is truly a place for this in wrestling. And I think it's an interesting conversation to have as to whether there is a home for death matches and whether they should ever be as mainstream as a network television program. So what I want to do is talk about a little bit about death matches in general, and then we can have a little bit of a debate as to whether there is a home for them at all and where that should be. So I had to actually try and research exactly what a death match is, because this is one of the things I hate about wrestling, Carl, is that you can have a million different names for a no disqualification match. And that's what I'm going to say, no disqualification match, because you can go, we'll have a street fight, or we'll have a hardcore match, or whatever, a tables, ladders, and chairs, or whatever. Like, basically, like tables, ladders, and chairs being a slight exception because they're encouraging a particular item. Like, whenever you're saying something like that, there's no disqualification. You can fight anywhere and you can use anything. That's essentially what a lot of these things are. So you could say, well, this is that sort of thing. This is a hardcore match. This is a street fight. This is a no holds barred. But it seems there are key elements to make a death match a death match, and that seems to be the use of items such as barbed wire or the glass light tubes, or in this case, a pizza cutter this week. Things that are a little bit more aggressive than your typical hardcore match, which sounds baffling to say, but like when you look at what WWE are willing to do, and they do like the thumbtack spots and stuff like that, this goes that step beyond that. I think that is what you'd pretty much surmise as a death match, is when we can go that a little bit maybe too far. And that leads us to the debate, Carl, as to, can you go too far? Is this an art form in itself? Now, we've had people such as Triple H come out and say that, what the likes of Garage Pro Wrestling that do is it isn't wrestling. It's I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but essentially that there's no place for it. It's barbaric, etc. And there are certain people who they want something more hardcore than what WWE put out, and that sort of. I'd hate to use the term, but that sort of cookie cutter stuff, and they want something like that is, I don't know, is it more unpredictable because of it? Because it's still predetermined, but there's that bloodlust there. Let's be honest, right? There's going to be blood, and they want to see something that extreme. And you can't even say, this is for people who can't wrestle, so they do something shocking, because we see people like, people might try and disagree with me on this, but like Matt Cardona is legitimately good in the ring. He has been over with the crowd before now. He worked for WWE for a long time. He knows the business, and he's gone on to have a hardcore match and have a really good hardcore match with Nick Gage. The same with Chris Jericho. No one can argue Chris Jericho's credentials as a wrestler, and he's having hardcore matches. And there seems to be like this, almost like a bucket list thing for wrestlers, or for a lot of wrestlers, to include this in their repertoire. So I don't think it's fair to say that this is something for people who aren't like wrestlers, and they're not technically gifted or anything like that, which, to be honest, in the past has been some of the insinuation from the likes of Triple H, is that, like, it's what you get in the indies, and you get this like sort of this rough style when they can't wrestle, so they're doing shock value stuff. So firstly, Carl, what do you make of it? Do you think this is more of like do you think this is the sort of thing that isn't professional wrestling, or do you think there is a place for it?
I'm on the fence. I'm not going to lie. There is definitely a place for an alternative, a more hardcore slightly more violent kind of thing. I don't know whether the use of glass and stuff where effectively you could legitimately puncture yourself to the point where Nick Gage himself, as anyone who watched This Week in Wrestling, the little known fact of the week this week was that Nick Gage was legally pronounced dead for 7 minutes off the back of a death match where he sliced an artery on some glass and bled out basically, and they managed to bring him back. So that's not pro wrestling, is it? Let's be honest.
The thing is, though, like, what I will say is he's kind of an exception to the hardcore element. That, like, yeah, obviously he genuinely got cut in that match, and it was a bad one. But some of the elements and some of the reason it got as bad as it did is because of his refusal to quit.
Yeah, no, there is that.
So that some of it is down to his mentality rather than the match type itself. But
yeah,
obviously it does increase that potential of injury. No denying that,
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I think that's why I'm on the fence, because I'm a fan of hardcore matches, 100%. Kendo sticks, trash cans, all the fun stuff that we used to see in the 24/7 hardcore title scene in WWE. Even when they went slightly edgier with the getting slammed on some thumbtacks. It's serious shit, man.
That shit hurts, man.
Yeah, they're not dummy. They're thumbtacks.
I'm saying that shit hurts, guys. I'll be honest with you. I've never been slammed onto some thumbtacks, but I did stand on a Lego once, and that hurt like a fucking bunch.
Well, there you go.
I know what hardcore matches are about. I know what it's like.
Exactly. But I mean, to be fair, you do get in some of these death matches and stuff, like Lego is a legitimate weapon now that they use for that. So it's a great point. But yeah, but by no means am I against hardcore matches and the use of weapons and all that kind of stuff. Like I love that kind of shit. I think for me, where it gets slightly too far is at what point do you stop doing professional wrestling as an art form and just go set about mutilating yourself for what? Especially in you've got to ask yourselves, and there's people who just love this shit. There's people who have a high pain threshold. They like getting hurt, and there's people who like the rush of some fans. But really, in most cases, it's like 20, 30 people, right, in a field somewhere, and these guys are literally can almost kill themselves, and it's like for what, right? Which is why the topic that we're talking about today, where we've seen, and it's not a true death match, don't get me wrong, but it was pretty much close enough. We've seen probably the first time a death match on a global scale at AEW on network television. Yeah. So it is starting to come out there in the limelight now, isn't it?
So, but that is because there is a higher risk element to it. So do you not think on some level that it's better placed in a big company like this where they have EMTs and they have the facilities to manage it better than a small indie promotion in a hall?
I mean, honestly, and I know AEW got a lot of shit for this, but when Jericho fell onto the thing and it was it's cardboard and stuff like that, it's entertainment. Does it need to be real? Does it need to be real glass that could actually kill somebody, or could we just have some some stuff that just it's I don't know what's it even called, sugar glass or whatever, and it just smashes to daisy and still looks real good.
Here's a fun fact for you, Carl. Sugar glass isn't really it's a fun name, but it's actually a resin. It's not actually sugar.
Okay.
The trouble you've got with sugar glass is it breaks apart nice, right? But it's used a lot in films because they can add the sound in later. The trouble you'd have in practical sense in wrestling is that it doesn't have the same sound. So you'd know it's not glass as an audience because it actually breaks apart. It's very brittle, but it doesn't actually make a sound. Do you know what I mean?
No, okay, yeah. I mean, so maybe a different type of thing.
Some fucking nerdy shit at you there.
Fucking, Mr. Glass over here. But no, I think, at what point is it acceptable to cross that line of putting on some entertainment for the fans and putting on something that looks super gruesome and bloody and violent through to actually, putting the people at risk?
Here's the thing, what I find, it's weird trying to find that line, and some of the reason I want to have this discussion with you, because you could argue a hardcore legend like Mick Foley has technically, to my knowledge, not been in a death match because he's not gone that far. Maybe sometimes in his ECW days, but I never really watched it then.
I think there's quite a few times in Japan back in the day. He was
But
he was in them exploding barbed wire matches.
Well, there you go, because they're classed as a hardcore match because of the explosives and shit. But you've got the likes of Mick Foley, who he is like a hardcore legend, and every time WWE's had him around, there's been some sort of hardcore match, whether he's been involved in it or not. Like most recently when he turned up, it was to support Dean Ambrose and give him Barbie, because he was having a hardcore match with Brock Lesnar. And there seems to be like moments, WWE don't do it regularly, but there seems to be moments when they decide it's tasteful enough to do some level of hardcore. And then you get like, the reason I bring it up is because you get like moments where like, Randy Orton wanted to be legitimately busted open by Brock for the shock value of it for the audience, and they knew that that was good storytelling. So there's a place for it, and they knew that you needed blood for that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yet you can look at a hardcore match in AEW between Jericho and Nick Gage, which everyone knew was going to be a bloody affair and involve a lot of weapons, and some people are like, "Oh, that's turned me off of wrestling." Oh, and you go, "Well, at what point is it tasteful? At what point isn't it?" Like, obviously, there's a world of difference between being busted open and what the match was between Nick Gage and Jericho. But that's precisely why I bring them both up. Is like, where is the line? Because obviously the WWE aren't afraid of showing blood at certain times, but they wouldn't go as far as this sort of match. And you go, well, where is, like, when Triple H is talking about death matches and sort of putting them down, and you wouldn't get that sort of thing. Where is the line? You know what I mean?
I think,
at what point are you going too far?
To be honest, I think it's all about the execution, isn't it? Like, you see people get busted open all the time in, whatever promotion, and it's usually from like a chair shot or something like that, and the camera cuts away, they do a quick blade job, the back, they're bleeding, all cool. The difference is you don't get, a real close in, like, zoom shot of someone using a pizza cutter or a fork or something which looks like, okay, this is making me squeamish now because I'm watching someone legitimately jab somebody with a fork. In the match with Jericho and Gage, he picked up a shard of the glass and was literally stabbing him in the head with it. And it was like, and I think it comes down to the execution of it.
Honestly, do you think this match was maybe a bit too much? We've seen plenty of matches with AEW. We've seen Moxley and Omega go at each other. We've seen Jericho in arguably some hardcore matches, like not far off this. Do you think this is potentially maybe a step too far then?
For me, no. For a more casual fan, maybe, because I mean, again, it comes down to how squeamish you are and what your threshold is to see this kind of stuff. I guess, like, for a lot of fans who've never seen this kind of thing before, who might be a bit squeamish at certain things, you can absolutely see why it could be a turn off for them to be sat there watching what they normally see as a wrestling contest and seeing someone being chapped in the head with a shard of glass. Like, they might be like, okay, I never signed up for this. So you can get it, you can sympathise.
So do you think there's a large subsection of people who are watching wrestling who still, like, almost watching wrestling but totally believing it's fake, and that's why they can enjoy it? Like, they'll watch all the fighting because they believe it's fake, and it's like a massive juxtaposition to go, well, that there's no way you can fake what's happening here, so then it becomes very real to them, and that's why they don't like it. Because I know some people watch it and honestly believe what's happening is real. I know some people still do that, and it's still people don't like the term real and fake because it insinuates that they're not going through it, and they clearly are. But the reason I mention it like that is that some people will watch it probably knowing that it's all theatrics and all over embellished, but there is no way of exaggerating, like pushing glass into his head or smashing him with those light things or landing on glass shards. There's no way of in any way easing off that hurts. You know what I mean? So do you think there's an element of it like that they can't sort of go, well, this is just theatrics, and that's maybe a lot of the off-put of it?
Maybe. It comes back again to the type of fan you are. So when I watched King of the Ring 98, obviously the infamous Mick Foley Taker match, like, I showed it to my dad and to my sister, and my sister was like, oh, well, obviously that's fake. Like, the thumbtacks, they're obviously not real. And I'm like it's sticking out of his face. Like, how do you fake this shit? But obviously that's someone who has never watched it before and doesn't really get it, so he's a super casual fan. So I think your super casual fans will look at it and go, "Oh, this is obviously it's fake, but it's a bit too gruesome for my tastes." Then you've got people who know that wrestling is a work, but like will still be a bit squeamish, even by stuff like landing on thumbtacks, because they know, to your point, oh, well, you can't fake that. So that's a bit much for me. And obviously you can throw them into this as well. But then I think you've just got people who fully appreciate the art form of pro wrestling, and you know, like maybe to me, like I love hardcore matches. Don't get me wrong. It for me, it's this kind of stuff which is, it doesn't offend me. I enjoyed the match. I wasn't like, oh, I don't need to see this and nothing like that. But you know, part of me in there is going, well, why are they doing this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is there not a way to convey what they're trying to convey without physically, you know, scarring somebody, like, and jabbing them in the head with a fork and causing them real pain? And it's like, you know, on the one side you come out of it and you go, fucking hell, you know, fair play to Jericho, he's been in an absolute war there, you know, mad props and all respect. Then on the other side you're like, but did he really need to do that? Like, I mean, I said it in, I was like, at this point in his career especially, did he need to do that?
But it does feel like almost like a bit of a bucket list thing.
Mm.
Like when you mentioned earlier, like, you know, is that people are speculating this might be a bit of a retirement tour for Jericho. It doesn't like feel ridiculous, that idea. Like, it does make a bit of sense, because these are some of the things that he's not really done in his career very often, or to this level. And it may be, and it might be that it's something he wanted to tick off the old list, you know.
What are your thoughts? Like, you know, where do you come at this from? Because
I'm confused. Like, I'm really not bothered. Like, I'm not bothered by a hardcore match in terms of that. I'm not squeamish about it. I'll watch it and it'll entertain. You know, I'll watch it like I do any other wrestling, where I'll have a particular person I want to win, and maybe that'll happen and maybe it won't, and I'll get frustrated with the storyline. I find it fascinating that like it's really hard to find a middle ground. Like, back when WWE was like a big thing, you had like this parallel of ECW, and so many people crying out for ECW, and they wanted something more extreme, but then you can apparently go too extreme, and it's like, I find it fascinating, like, in that sense, like that, or that, like when you watch GPW and you saw the Matt Cardona match, and so many people, like, it becomes almost their own little hardcore little area that you're not allowed to encroach upon. So that got so much heat because he's not one of them. And like, people really hated the fact that he won the belt, because how dare he win the belt in such a like a hardcore platform that's their baby. Do you know what I mean? And it's weirdly protected as well by the sort of the smaller promotions who are all about hardcore matches, and almost believed to be an art form in and of itself. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, people give Nick a lot of Nick Gage's credit goes to the fact that he is a hardcore wrestler, and it becomes its own thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I find the perspective on it totally fascinating.
yeah. I think, you know, it comes back to, depending on what type of fan you are, whether you're a casual fan, whether, you know, it's a difficult one, because obviously GCW, their fan base, you know, they are solely after watching deathmatch style, hardcore style, you know, backyard style matches. And so someone who is like Matt Cardona, who's come from, you know, the feds, is looked at as like, oh, you know, he's a piece of shit. He can't hang with our guys. He's just a shitty wrestler. And it's like, wait a second. So for me, and this is a terrible comparison, but it's the closest one I can make. It's almost like people who fucking love MMA, but think, oh, I can't watch WWE. It's that fake shit. MMA's where it's at, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, but they're different types of entertainment, aren't they? And you know, we look at something like a death match, and it's like, is it a more mature, grown up type thing? Well, in some ways, yeah. In other ways, no, because yeah, like what are you really getting from it? You're just getting guys who are stabbing each other for $10 at an indie show.
But it's weird how like AEW have introduced probably more hardcore elements in the last couple of years than WWE have done in a long time, and it's weirdly polarizing, because they don't seem to be winning fans in either side of it. It's almost not worth it, because you've got the people who love the hardcore stuff who are almost annoyed with AEW for trying to take over their thing, and then you've got the people who just wanted like your WWE type stuff who are like, oh, that's too much for me. And it's like, who's this, when you put it on a platform like AEW, who's this actually for? Because it seems to be bugging both sides of the crowd. Do you know what I mean?
I think AEW try and do variety. Like they've had so many different styles of matches and different. I mean they've introduced brand new match types, haven't they? The fucking what was the one with Orange Cassidy and Jericho? The fucking
the Mimosa one.
Yeah. So like they like to do new stuff, try new things. Introduce different match types. And yeah, I think to your point, it's not always going to work. You might get some fans tune into it and think it was great. Others go, well, that was awful. And I think that they're still just trying to put on an alternative kind of product that offers something different all the time. But yeah.
I do think, like, in the context of that particular Nick Gage match, I think it worked for, like, we couldn't, like, you were expecting these trials that Jericho had to go through to be all Pinnacle people and just matches with some sort of stipulation. Like the first one we got was almost like buying into what our perspective was going to be. So you're going to have a match against Shawn Spears and it's going to be for chairs, and that almost was like, what's the word? Like a red herring to us. We go, oh, this is what we're going to get now, Brill. And then the next one straight out of nowhere is Nick Gage, and it's going to be like an extreme fucking match with a lot of blood. So I think it was really effective to the story they're telling with Jericho and these trials with MJF. But I don't know. Do you think AEW have done one too many? Like in that time frame that they've existed? Because I think some people have made an argument to that as well, that like, oh, they like to do this sort of spot a bit too much, and like for a risky match type, you should make them more sparing.
I mean, how many have they done? I can only think of 3, really. So they had the original barbed wire match with Kenny and Moxley. Then we had the exploding barbed wire death match, which obviously...
Well, they've had, if you broaden the spectrum a little bit, they've had a street fight between Moxley and Omega. They've had a street fight between Santana and Ortiz and Best Friends. They've had... Jericho's done some. I'm struggling now with Jericho's ones. I think Jericho's had some previous hardcore. Like, wasn't his last Painmaker match a hardcore one in some capacity as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like I wouldn't put those kind of the street fight type ones and like in the same league really, as the same level. Like I think you've then got like the Stadium Stampedes and stuff, and like you wouldn't lump them. I think they're like Falls Count Anywhere kind of external environment type matches.
I get your point with the likes of the Stadium Stampede. I'm listing the street fights because there's that the argument people are making is about the risk elements, and obviously you expect some weapons and some blood in those sort of matches. So I think it was probably more akin to that, where you go, are they making too many risky stipulations too frequent?
No, I get your point. I don't think so. I think for me, where the line is drawn for me is the type of weapons and the type of things. So as I've said, hardcore matches I am a fan of. Hit someone with a kendo stick. Any of your usual repertoire from a hardcore match, I'm all for it. It's when you start then introducing things like, I don't know, shards of glass to the head, or throwing them through basically just glass. I think I've got a problem with the use of glass.
This is the funny thing, though, because this seems to be a staple of a death match that you have to have the light tubes. That seems to be one of the things. The light tubes. Substituting your ropes for barbed wire seems to be another common one where you classify it as a death match, but the light tube seems to be a fairly common one, when then there's no choice. Once you've smashed that light tube, there's glass all over the ring, so you're going to get cut with some glass. Even if you don't deliberately stab them in the face with it, you're going to get cut with some glass.
It was quite scary, the one on AEW this past week, to be fair, because they had the massive kind of pane of glass that they did the suplex spot with. Oh no, it was the Hurricane Rana spot, wasn't it? But when Gage went through that and it smashed, it fucking flew into the audience. And they quickly, like, they cut to the audience and you could see, like, some of the fans were like, oh shit. And then they straight away cut back and it was like, shit, like that, the fucking splash zone for glass, like, Jesus. So yeah, I don't know. I think for me, I think that's where, I'm not saying I draw the line at all, because as I've said, I enjoyed this match, but I think I'm less interested in matches that use like glass and barbed wire than I am matches which use weapons or environment.
So when you say about environments, like, obviously let's look at a notorious spot that involved glass.
It's the windshield
for WWE. No, for WWE. And that was and we all remember it when Kurt Angle was fighting Shane McMahon I want to say King of the Ring, and they repeatedly tried to break that pane of glass.
Yeah.
Eventually did. So obviously we had glass everywhere. Is that something that you would deem too far, or is that an environmental factor?
So
because they can walk away from it. It's not like they're, you know what I mean? Like they do the spot and they can get away from the glass. Does that make it a little bit better?
It's a good example of that, because I thoroughly enjoyed that match, but I will cringe, and I will continue to cringe to this day at the failed attempts to put Shane through that and him landing on his head.
It's more dropping on his head than actually going through the glass, though, isn't it? To be fair.
So, but again, like, it was cool and all, but I don't know. A lot of the time, I question: is it necessary? Like, if he didn't put him through that glass, would it have still been a great match? And I think it would have been. I think it did add a little something, but I don't think it was, essentially why I enjoyed the match the way I did. So it's one of them. I can take it or leave it, but I think if you're going to use it, it has to be super worthwhile, not just because it's gory or it's going to, cut people.
Yeah. So I suppose the big question that we sort of discussed to close out on is, like, they're always going to exist. There's always going to be a place for them. But do you think that place should be on network television?
Do you know what? It's a good point. I asked, I'm not sure whether I asked our Instagram followers that question, but I asked them the question of, are death matches good for pro wrestling? And the response we had, Anthony, if that comes through on the screen.
65% yes for those
65
who
yes.
are listening to us, yeah.
Yeah, and 35
and the question is, are death matches good for pro wrestling? So that's just for anyone who's listening rather than watching. So, there seems to be not a massive majority, but it does lean in the favor of yes, they are, which is interesting. I did notice someone responded. I don't know if we've had too many responses. I did notice we'd had one particular reply where they hadn't just answered the question. They messaged us as well and said, I think they said, like, basically sparingly, didn't they? Like, as long as you don't do them too often, I think was the general message. I'm paraphrasing because I only glanced at the message, but I know that was sort of the idea. So I think we can all agree on that it should definitely not be a mainstay and something that's done too often. But I don't know. I'm a bit torn. Like, for me, I really didn't mind it. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be offended if they did another one, I suppose. I think if they got to a weekly thing, it'd probably take some of the impact out of what they're trying to do, because it's meant to be shocking.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just seems to be that a lot of people don't think it should be the sort of thing that you have on such a big promotion. Like, it's almost like they feel like it should be kept to smaller promotions, which is crazy. That
didn't bother me. I think ultimately my final stance on the whole thing is I like hardcore matches, and I'm happy with them being used sparingly. I think ultimately we're creating this culture of, like, one-upsmanship, where it's like, well, okay, now we've got people going through glass and, cutting themselves and being stabbed in the head with shards of glass and stuff. Like, what's next? Like, if we continue, do you know what I mean though? Like, if we're continuously trying to, like, I'm still happy with like the weapons that we've been using in hardcore matches for decades. Thumbtacks is extreme as it is for me. You don't need to then go, well, let's put them on broken glass.
Like, I think I agree with you. Like, I'm not sat here like, oh God, I wish they hadn't have done that, and I'll be upset if they do it again and all this. But I totally agree with you. Like, if they didn't include the glass, I probably wouldn't be that bothered.
Yeah,
it'd still be for a good match.
Yeah.
What do you make of, obviously, AEW can be a bit cringe at times. Do you think we're ever going to see a glass ceiling match where the aim is to smash the fucking thing?
I mean, they've grabbed the fucking giant brass ring, haven't they? So, breaking through the glass ceiling.
We're going to have a match where you have to climb a ladder, smash through the glass ceiling, and grab that brass ring. That's going to happen at some point.
It's going to be called, like, the Labours of Vince McMahon or something, isn't it? But yeah,
I mean, I feel like there's a lot more for a company who's already kind of getting a bit dogged for unsafe thing, like obviously the concussion issue with Matt and stuff like that. I feel like including as many glass spots like regularly is probably not a great idea. But again, they've been doing it since day. If you look at Mox and Omega, I like, one of the main things I remember about their match when they attacked each other backstage was going through that coffee table.
Yeah.
Like, again, no way to fake that. That must have hurt a ton, and that was a glass table. So It's not like they've not done it before, but like you say, I'm not like where's the glass, but doesn't bother me too much, I suppose.
Yeah, I think final words from me on it is I like hardcore matches. I would like to see more. I do like seeing that slightly edgier, violent stuff in dribs and drabs where appropriate. But yeah, I think we run a bit of a risk in terms of just trying to do more and more and more and more shock value to the point where to your point then, I don't think we needed the pane of glass spot. I don't think we needed the stabbing him in the head with a shard of glass or a fork. The pizza cutter, yeah, okay, cool, if you want to do that, whatever.
The pizza cutter, though, that's one where, let's be honest, you can control that. And this is where the scripted element comes in. This is where you go, that's where you can sort of believe that it wasn't done to an extreme. Don't get me wrong, it's Nick Gage, so he might have did it as much as he possibly could. But the idea being he doesn't have to put the same pressure on that you normally would. The pizza cutters are quite blunt instruments, really. They're not sharp like a knife. Do you know what I mean? Or certainly mine aren't. Maybe I've just got a shit pizza cutter. But my point being, he doesn't have to dig it in. So you can make it look bad when it's not as bad as it looks.
Go and get your pizza cutter. This is a YouTube exclusive, guys. But no, I think to your point, a pizza cutter, for example, can be gimmicked, can't it? It can be oh, this is really bad, and
he was already bleeding at that point as well, so you don't you can make it look much worse than it probably was. But that being said, when you're smashing someone in the back with a light tube and then using those shards, it's less easy to control because that would have been sharp.
Yeah, and it wasn't so bad in the Jericho match because I felt like it was controlled. It certainly wasn't as bad as the fucking what's his face Cardona match.
Yeah,
at all. Cardona got fucking sliced up, shredded.
That is the home for hardcore matches, isn't it? Really, or certainly the biggest one in the Indies. So I almost expect that to have been worse. I also loved Matt Cardona's cheeky tweet during the Jericho match saying I'd beat both of these guys, which is annoyingly true.
He was, I'm not sure if it was the same tweet, but he also did one where he was eating Domino's pizza and he had obviously the pizza cutter there as well. So yeah, I love it. He's being savage, but so I think that's my stance on it really. I don't mind it. I wasn't put off by the one we had. I just think if we can have the same effect without legitimately putting people at risk, then I'd prefer to go down that route. But if it's for shock value and that kind of thing, and the people that are wanting to do it, then okay, over to you guys. But I don't think we should ever be at a point where on a major network TV show we're putting people at risk of the point of severing an artery and potentially nearly dying. So
there you have it, guys. To answer the age-old question of should hardcore matches be a thing, we've sat down, we've discussed it, and we've decided yeah, maybe.
Yeah, if done right.
No, I think that's the thing, isn't it? You have to be very careful and probably not too frequent, but there is definitely a home for a hardcore match. Sorry, hardcore for a death match.
Yes, there is.
And there we have it. That is our unique segment for the week. We've had a nice little debate about death matches.
We have indeed. It was fun. I enjoyed that.
I enjoyed that.
We should do more of these kind of things. Tag team wrestling. Is it still relevant today?
Do you know what?
WWE say no.
Not to digress away from our unique segments because we want to close out soon, but I actually do think a good one to discuss would be trios. Should trios be a thing? Because that is something AEW apparently is still looking to push and maybe even introduce titles for. Should trios be a bigger thing than it is?
Find out. Not next week. But
no, definitely not next week. We've got stuff happening next week.
We do have stuff happening next week. Excited for next week. Should be a good one.
Oh, yeah.
Genius. Yeah, that was the show. We gave you a revamped version of This Week in Wrestling. Once again, let us know how you found that. We went through a meaty episode of the Ringside Report with lots of news, lots of speculation, lots going on. And then speaking of meat, we spoke about, cutting each other like pieces of meat.
Go get yourselves a nice meteor pizza from Domino's.
I like it.
And But yeah, that's another fun week. And next week, it's going to be a good one next week, isn't it, Carl?
Oh yeah.
Are we going to give any hints? Are we going to give any hints for anyone who's still listening to us talk after we finish talking about death matches?
I mean, more hints than the ones that we masterfully slipped in a second ago.
I think your hint was. I don't even think your hint was so subtle. I don't even know if anyone picked up on it. So I'm going to just make out. I'm going to point out that you did drop a hint.
My hint was perfect, I think.
I totally agree. So I think a subtlety is just on point there, Carl. And I think anyone who's a bit savvy to it might know what we're up to next week.
Yeah. Let us know if you worked it out. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more news, more views, and something quite good. So yeah,
Indeed.
We will see you then. Take it easy.
Take it easy.
You're watching or listening
to A2theK.
The A2theK.
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 These guys are awesome. Check it out.
Check it out. Change your life. You'll be thanking me later.